Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. And it is Frontiers of Knowledge segment for which we are meeting today. This world is suffering from hunger. The food supply is getting quantitatively higher, but compared to the demand, is in a short supply. And we find that many people in the predominant agricultural countries are still engaged in traditional agricultural practices. Thereby, we hear of the suicide by the farmers, the poverty, but the innovative ones, the entrepreneurial ones chart new courses. And they are aware of the fastest growing sources of food, which can satisfy the hunger of the people. The green fields that grow along much of India's shoreline have a large potential as sustainable food sources. And then, amazingly, the coastline, not only in India, but say even in North America, in Africa, anywhere, has not been utilized. All our agriculture is land based. And now, mind you, I'm not talking of the hydroponics. I'm talking of the natural food growing, which can be made available, A, B, the same can grow. And as you would find when I tell you that 5 gram of seed of this food was growing sufficient food in 100 kilometers area. The green fronts that grow along much of the India shoreline have a large potential as a sustainable food source. And not only that, they also fight the climate change. There's a place called Rameshwaram, and that is on way to Pambam Islands, sacred pilgrim site. And below the sea surface, there's a change taking place that is transforming the region's ecosystem, economy, and even its cuisine. These coastal villages, where you can see the emerald green waters and bobbing catamarans, under the water are the villages which are home to India's seaweed boom. The seaweed which was being grown essentially in China and in South Korea is now being grown there and is becoming not only a source of food for the people themselves, but also earning huge foreign exchange for those people. And not only that, as I told you, this is a great carbon sinkhole. Agreed. I know the traditionalist in Indian Ayurveda system would say, well, we have been using it for thousands of years. But it has never played a major part in Indian culture as it had in China or Vietnam, Korea, and other places. But picking up seaweed for traditional remedies is an old practice. That's a fact. And one area, Gulf of Mannar, is a rich biodiverse area, extremely rich. Here, locals have historically collected natural wild seaweed, which is indigenous. And this is the place where India is turning as a model for seaweed cultivation, which globally has become the fastest growing sector of food production. And seaweed production is increasing 8% every year. This would not only be satisfying the hunger of the millions of people, but would be major marketing segment of the international trade. The regions of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu harbor world's highest seafood biodiversity. Not only in India, there are 282 species being reported along Tamil Nadu's 1,000-kilometer coastline alone. And if you take the whole of Indian coast, there are 841 species of seaweed. 841. And can you believe it? Nobody is, or nobody was till recently harvesting them. Today, the agrarian system in India is dependent on 60% of the land use of India, which is the base of agriculture. And out of that, 47% of the cultivable land is being lost to the soil degradation. Water erosion is responsible for more than one third of this loss. So, with the land being depleted by urbanization and by the soil degradation, makes it imperative to find the new sources. And seaweed has innate ability, which people are now realizing, to combat hunger, but more important, malnutrition. It's a perfect source of iodine, vitamins, and proteins. And that's why the government has announced recently $87 million worth of subsidies for seaweed farming activities in the next 5 years. Now, $87 million subsidy. And when I look at the farmers' protest that the government is not having the MSP, if they, suppose, for example, in Punjab alone, they start growing seaweed, have deep ponds, the way aquaculture was done. And this will not be harming the land. Aquaculture was harming. And have this share of $87 million. Now, the nutrition value of seaweed is far from being the only appeal. It gains its energy through photosynthesis, a similar way that the plants on the land get. Seaweeds, after all, macroalgae. Seaweeds are, but then there's another thing. They absorb carbon dioxide, cleaning the air, and convert the carbon to sugars for energy and release oxygen into water. Now, there was a misconception that the carbon stored in seaweed would eventually be released again when algae decomposed in the ocean. No, there has been a discovery of a huge quantity of dead seaweed on the ocean floor. And when it was swept out of the ocean, it was found that the carbon was locked up in the sediments. It was not released. So this is a natural sinkhole. As I say, you gain both ways. You get the food, a nutritious food, and you save the planet from pollution. Could anything be better? No. So seaweed cultivation, identified as a carbon sink, can help mitigate climate change. And it forms the base of marine food web along with planktonic and provides food and habitat for a number of marine animals. And same can be harvested by the coastal communities. And particularly, the women can do it much better, they say, because they are not dependent on other factors and they can become financially independent. There has been a slow start in the world over, but for the first time, I remember I was involved in that and I had suggested this to the Central Salt and Marine Chemical Research Institute. And they had imported then 5 grams of seed from Malaysia, just 5 grams. They wanted to experiment it. And when the field trial started, it was introduced, as I told you. And I remember it was Dr. Ashwaran who met me. And I said, why don't you get it? Of course, I charged my fee. And they got it. And now that 5 gram of seed material has been propagated. And in last time I talked to him when I was in India, it was in 2003. Yes. He told me that now 100 kilometers of the coastline near Park Bay, successfully they are growing with 5 grams of seed, 100 kilometer forms. Can anything be cheaper and still expensive? So, but large scale seed harvesting started after that, when this 5 gram was converted into 100 kilometers. And when I was reading recently the Nature, they had mentioned my name and my company's name, that we were the pioneers, but we were actually the pioneers who should go to CSM CRI because we were consultants. And then, the surge in the cultivation has a positive socio-economic impact on the coastal areas. It helps the farmers get economic independence. Today, 1,200 families are dependent on that. And each raft, they have raft, bamboo raft, can yield 200 kilograms, of which 50 kilograms is used for start cultivation for the next raft. So it's growing up internationally. Then another thing that's happening is this food of the future, environmentally sustainable, economically extremely profitable, is also a great source of biofuels, biofertilizers, and other projects. And the liquid biofuel has been shown to boost crop yield. So you produce a biofertilizer from the seaweed, use it on the land, so you don't have to use the pesticides and chemical fertilizers. Somebody was telling me that the seaweed cultivation has come up with this ecological downside, and unchecked wild growth has damaged the coral reefs. But then who says it should be unchecked? That's why I say let's control it, let's grow it. And a study has shown that a small area of 77 square kilometers can easily feed 77 square meters, not kilometers, just 77 square meters. That is 828 square feet can feed a village, whole village. And UNO, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, has published in its latest report on Seaweed that the market today is $66 billion a year. $6 billion, and India's share today is $500 million. So that 5 gram of seed has today developed into $500 million market. Historically, food has been the traditional one, but we need to change the Indian cuisine, the international cuisine, and this seaweed would be boon to the especially countries where land is a problem, small countries, landlocked countries, and not landlocked, but the islands and others whose economy was majorly dependent on fish. Another food of the future is insects, high protein value, absolutely high protein, and they have been approved with the European Union now. So, what else can be better? Insects as a non vegetarian, seaweed as a vegetarian meal, and that is nutritious, as I said, more protein. And then let me tell you, along with this other thing, which I would say that a study has been done, and they say that the children who are belonging to the marginal section of society are 20 centimeters shorter. Why? Because the food is not proper. And this report has been published in again in Nature, and they tell that in 2019, the tallest 19-year-old boy lived in Netherlands, and the shortest lived in Timor in Africa. And then they say that economically, for example, in UK, the height for the economically rich sections where good food was there was 5 feet 10 inches, and it was 5.5 inches for the people who are not that rich. So researchers are now tracking down that is it only because of the food and healthy environment, but it's a fact, established fact that 19-year-olds, on an average, the shortest are in South and Southeast Asia, Latin America, and East Africa, where the food is not of that high level. But where the balanced food is there, like in Nordic countries and Scandinavian countries, Canada, you see taller people. So even from that point of view, the futuristic foods, insects and seaweed, they are the salvation. Would the farmers listen to it? Let's hope so. Because that way is a salvation, not only theirs, but of the whole world. Thank you. And we meet next week again to discuss new leaps in knowledge. Widen your horizons of knowledge. Thank you.